Because for me, this is such a, like I said, full circle experience and a story that can be shared. And it's not just about the adrenaline that you get when you kill this animal. It is very much so taking a life, right? But whenever you have this idea of somebody who is just a killer and doesn't care about where the meat goes or what happens to the animal or how it's treated or anything like that, then that's totally separate from the story that I'm trying to tell
Absolutely.
people. So
And I do, like I said, the narrative has shifted so much in the last few years where people, like there are so many stories like to be told, so many behind the scenes moments. Like there's like hunting is like a movie in a way. Like there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's heartbreak, and there's excitement, and there's joy, and there's pain. And it's like, I feel like all of those things like are now we're working in a way to show the world like what that means.
Tejas.
Still too.
Tejas Hunt Club Podcast is the podcast for you and you and you and you.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Tejas Hunt Club podcast. Today you will have me, Meagan, McElya, as a solo host. Today we are interviewing head chef at Game Girl Gourmet, Holly Hearn. Since we've recorded this podcast, she is actually now serving as the head chef at the Glendean Hunting Camp in New Zealand, where she will stay for the next 3 months. Throughout this episode, you'll get to know a little bit more about Holly, where she grew up, how she was introduced to the outdoors, how she went from being an engineer to becoming a traveling chef specializing in wild game. We also dive a little bit into how people connect over meals and how that might tie back to introducing people into wild game and the hunting culture. Just to remind you guys about some of our upcoming events, we are attending the Total Archery Challenge in San Antonio on April 28th. And we are also filming a short session for the National Shooting Sports Foundation the next day on April 29th. We also have some fishing trips lined up in June and throughout the summer, hoping to get some more on the books. And be sure to also check out our turkey season content that Jared and Brandon have been working on. We have some content both on YouTube and via the Tejas Hunt Club podcast. So be sure if you haven't listened to those to circle back and do so. Without further ado, I will not stall you guys much longer. Let's get to know Miss Holly Hearn with Game Girl Gourmet. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Tejas Hunt Club podcast. Welcome back. Today we have Holly Hearn on of Game Girl Gourmet. She is going to tell us a little bit about her background in the outdoors industry as a wild game chef, and also kind of how Game Girl, I'm going to have to really practice that.
GGG.
And also how Game Girl Gourmet came about. So welcome, Holly. Thank you for being on.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. So
can you tell us a little bit about where you were born, where you were raised? I know you're from Texas, around the Houston area, but not quite sure exactly where.
yeah, so I was actually born and raised in Huffman on Lake Houston. So kind of, country meets the lake and the water, which is,
Absolutely.
kind of how I exist in this world.
So did you grow up fishing and hunting, or is that something that you came about later in life?
Yes and no. So I grew up on the water and my dad always hunted, and he was not a super avid fisherman, but we definitely fished. He was really into like boating and navigating and things like that. So I spent a lot of time on boats, but not in like bigger boats and not necessarily fishing, though. That came later in life. I really started getting into hunting on my own probably when I was about 14. Like it was never really forced on me or anything like that. I went when at my leisure, and I just happened to really enjoy it and fall in love with it.
Absolutely. Cool. So I know a little bit about your background as far as you weren't always planning to be a chef. This is something that you enjoyed cooking, but tell us a little bit about, where you started as far as your college degree and kind of the direction you were headed before you started your journey as a chef.
So it's actually funny. I had no plans of being a chef. I went to Lamar University in Beaumont, and I have a degree in industrial engineering. and I worked in manufacturing and process improvement and development. And that was kind of always where like my heart and passion, was, or so I thought. Cooking was my way to control my diet in college and also my creative release in engineering school. I There's a big, huge, long story. So I dropped out of college the first time, like right, I don't even know how many 18-year-olds are like, are capable of handling all the responsibilities of making such intense choices that like young in life. I definitely was not one of them. I was a hooligan. So my first time in school, I went to A&M Galveston, and I ended up just, not being like mature enough to handle college. So I gained a bunch of weight and dropped out, and this all has a point. And I moved home to Beaumont at the time, and really kind of started cooking as a lifestyle change. And then as I got more like proficient in it, and of course, like this is where like the wild game came in, because we had all these big freezers full of wild game. And, in Beaumont, there just wasn't a diversity in food because I also grew up traveling a lot. I've been to 29 different countries. So I had a really broad palette, and the kind of food that you could get out was not the kind of food that I like to eat. So I just started experimenting with wild game and like learning how to prepare it in ways that was, like kind of learning the techniques of how to make it, I'm not going to say palatable, because like wild game is totally
Well,
palatable.
there's some good food in Beaumont. If you
Oh,
ask some
for
people, I know
sure.
that, but
For sure.
it's the same style Southern
Yeah.
seafood,
Cajun food, all of that. But I really just kind of started playing with working with those proteins, because there are specific techniques. You can't just prepare it the same way like you would cook it. Like you wouldn't cook a quail the same way you would cook a chicken.
Right.
And so that's really kind of the time in my life where I started like getting into cooking wild game, and then of course making a healthier lifestyle change, because I was super petite and I got really, gained a lot of weight, and then I lost 75 pounds like doing that. So it was really a healthy lifestyle change situation. But as time went on, I continued to cook while I was in engineering school as like a creative release, because it was just something that I could do with my hands, that was sitting at a computer or crunching numbers, that usually came out really great, and I got to eat at the end, so bonus points, as in terms of hobbies. But that's really how it all kind of started. And then I shooting sporting clays competitively my junior year of school, and that's when I started an Instagram, my original Instagram, Hotshot Holly, and it was like kind of to follow my shooting journey as, somebody who grew up hunting, but is now trying to pick up sporting clays, which obviously didn't take off for me.
It did
For
for a
a
little while. I
while.
remember, and just so you guys know, listeners, I've been following Holly for years. I don't think we had actually officially met until recently, and then the first time she cooked for me was this past weekend. So Holly does. First of all, your Zoli gun. We'll talk about that just a little bit, because she
Definitely.
is a gorgeous, gorgeous being. But no, I mean, I've seen you go and compete very well at some of these clay shoots. Not recently,
Yeah.
but I watched your journey for sure.
So that's kind of how that started. And I would just post food photos just kind of for fun, just showing, I guess, showing people what I was doing with wild game. And that kind of really like took off. And so one of the producers from the TV show MasterChef reached out to me and asked me if I would consider auditioning for the show. And I was about to be in my senior year of engineering school. So of course I'd never even considered, one, that I was like talented enough. Like, I'm not talking down about myself, but you know what I mean? I'd never even like, that thought never crossed my mind. I was like, what is going to be the next internship that gets me the highest paying job? So because for me, cooking was just that's my happy place. It's like effortless for me to do. So I never thought about competing with it. I had plenty of other things that I was being competitive in. But anyways, I auditioned for the show, and I ended up making it like all the way to the final rounds of casting. Like, I was in LA for 2 weeks. I didn't make the final cut of the show. I probably asked too many questions. But that ended up being such a blessing. And this is kind of where like the story takes such a dramatic turn. So we're in my senior year of engineering school now. And I come home from MasterChef. They rearranged my degree program at Lamar so I could go to MasterChef and not like lose my place. Come home and COVID happens. So the airports are like
3 years ago yesterday, I saw a TikTok about the lockdown.
Yeah, literally shut down like within 3 days of me coming home. And I was like, and of course that was like a painful experience for me because it was the first thing that I'd ever like worked really hard at that didn't pan out. But also solid lessons. But yes, so COVID happened, and of course, like now we're all trapped at home, and I just continued to cook. And I was living in Beaumont at the time, and my dad's house was 15 minutes from me. And so I would go out to my dad's farm and I just pig hunted. Literally all I did was I finished my degree remotely. I pig hunted and I cooked because there was nothing else. And I shot a lot. But there's nothing else to do. And so that's kind of, really when I refined a lot of techniques, worked on a lot of new things. I mean, taught myself how to bake crazy types of breads and bagels and, just experimented with all kinds of flavors because we weren't able to travel. So I would sit up at night just researching random countries, like what is the cuisine? What are the hallmarks?
Where are some of the places you've been? I didn't know that you'd traveled so many different countries. What are some of your favorites?
Argentina is definitely my favorite. That was the first time I ever hunted internationally. First time and only time I have ever hunted internationally, I should add. Argentina is definitely one of my favorites. I just recently went to Guatemala to billfish, and the fishing was so incredible. It was such a great experience. I definitely wanted to learn how to feed and hook my own billfish. So that was, and there's not really a better place to do it where you see the same type of numbers. Because here in the Gulf, there's a lot more billfish than I feel like people realize. But it's, we're hundreds of miles offshore out for days at a time. And then in Guatemala, you're like 40 miles out and it's a, 8-hour trip. But that was great. So those are two of my top favorite, like outdoor sporting adventure type places. I've tarpon fished in Costa Rica. Not a country, but
And would you say those are some of the places where you draw some of that inspiration from?
Absolutely. So I can find inspiration in most things, but like one of my favorite things is I love doing like venison with chimichurri and fried plantains and rice and beans. I really work with a lot of heavy Asian influence, and I went to China in 2014 when I was still in middle school, and that really had a profound impact on me. So I like really do seek out a lot of there's a lot of Asian influence in my food. And then recently, having worked more in sport fishing during the summers, I've really taken a liking to studying Japanese cuisine and sushi and raw preparations and Peruvian food. But that's kind of where I draw on a lot of inspiration for my dishes, but also I take inspiration from hunting and fishing and the memories that people have for themselves. So I recently had a client, and it was a bachelor party, and we were planning to do a meat charcuterie board, and each thing on the charcuterie board had a story about a hunting story. So we were gonna do a bourbon glazed duck, and it tell the story of the time that he and one of his groomsmen were wood duck hunting. And then the next dish was we were gonna do grilled backstrap with, I forget what the accoutrement for that was, but each thing had kind of a deeper meaning. So I find a lot of inspiration in my hunting stories, but also my friends' hunting stories as well. So
I think that makes it so interesting with you. And like I said, the first time you cooked for me was this past weekend, but there was a whole story behind the day and what we were doing throughout the day with the quail shooting and the quail hunt, and then having the quail dinner. There's an entire, like I said, field to plate was the event name, but it truly is. It truly is field to plate, and there is a story behind all of that. So I know that you mentioned during COVID, you started to do some research and using your inspiration from your travels. You want to emphasize a little bit more about that?
So really that's the basis for, yes, sorry. Emphasis on COVID and
No,
traveling.
it's okay. Go ahead.
So yes, when we were trapped in our house, it was kind of my the way that I coped with not because I am a very busy person. I like to go. I'm very social. So being trapped in my house and not being able to be super social was kind of difficult. So like I really did draw inspiration from the places that I wanted to go, and like that was kind of like what gave me hope through this weird, crazy time that nobody knew how to navigate. We had no idea how long it was going to last, what it was going to be like day to day, week to week, month to month. And that was kind of the thing that kind of drove me forward. And it wasn't until like I graduated that May, and I had like all of the job offers that I had lined up completely fell through because no one was hiring engineers, even though I was graduating with like 6 or 7 years worth of working experience. Nobody was hiring. In fact, veteran engineers were being laid off. So it was just like looking back, it was all of the stars, God working, however you want to say that, that tickles your fancy. Looking back, I can see all of the pieces falling into place for this to happen because, you know, had I not had the experience with MasterChef and being selected to go as far as I did, I wouldn't have had the confidence to jump out and try to do this because there was nobody doing it at the time. I mean, you had a couple like blogs, like Hank Shaw, the OG. Really hoping to get to cook with him in April. But, you know, Hank Shaw, a few other people, there wasn't really anybody that was cooking wild game. And if they were, they weren't doing it the same way I was, or there just wasn't a ton out there. So flash forward, graduate May, here we are in August. A buddy of mine invites me to go on a sport fishing trip. So this probably seems very like weird and like left field, but my dad had a Hatteras when I was growing up, and he did all the maintenance on it himself, and that was kind of his hobby, his passion thing that he did. And so like so many of my childhood memories are being yelled at in an engine room. But when I was invited to go offshore, my buddy was like, well, if you want to cook a couple meals, like you won't have to like pay for fuel. And I was like, yeah, easy. But like no, like I cooked the whole time, so I just cooked the whole time. And I was talking with the captain. His name's Jack Beal. He's a really close friend now. I adore Jack. He's like as close to an adopted grandparent, I think, as you can find, grandparent, parent, whatever. He was looked at me at the end of that trip and he's like, hey, you should think about doing this full time. I bet there's a market for it. I mean, you showed up with all the ingredients, you cooked this whole time, like, and I was like, yeah, okay. Like, and then a couple months later, I was in like a car wreck, and like, I'm not gonna say that was like a lie. Like, it wasn't a super bad car wreck, but it was, you know, bad enough that I like totaled my truck. The other truck was totaled. It was like a head-on collision. Super lucky. And I was like, well, life is so short. What's the worst that could happen? And I just also like I had been doing some side jobs here and there, making extra money. I don't know. I couldn't stand sitting around anymore. And not having a job, like a full-time something to pour my time and energy into. And I wasn't going to wait for the world to get better. So I started Game Girl Gourmet. And then that's the origin story, is it was, you know, on an offshore fishing trip of all places.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when you started the Instagram account too in 2020, and it was just kind of like I knew you like to cook. You posted about cooking on your Hotshot Holly account before. But as far as really honing in on that, it's been so cool to watch, you know, just from the offshore charters and going in from that to seeing you host this event or cooking at this hunt or, you know, meeting this certain group of people that you've cooked for a couple times and creating those relationships throughout the last now 3 years. Can you talk a little bit about some of your favorite, maybe hunting camps that you've been on? I know you've talked about the charters themselves, but I know you also cook at hunting camps and private events.
Yes. So it's so hard to pick a favorite because I think like the people that I meet are so incredible. Truly, that's my favorite part is I have made connections with so many different types of people from all different types, like walks of life, from people that like never even thought about hunting to like expert hunters. I don't know if I could pick a favorite, But I mean, I've definitely had some very like memorable experiences. I think um doing some stuff in marathon was probably my very first gig, and that was incredible. I'd never been that far west Texas. I had no idea it
That's
is
out
out
there.
there, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't even really know what I was doing. I just like started my business and I was like, oh, I guess I'm gonna do this. And it was such a learning opportunity for me in so many different ways. Um, Man, another one that really stands out is I really do like doing the private ranch weekends because I get to work one on one very intimately with my clients rather than like working with an outfitter. So I get to hear some of their stories and the reasons why I'm there. Like I've done a lot of Valentine's Day dinners for at ranches for, the owner and his wife and, maybe their kids and get to hear their stories is really cool. But I mean, man,
Yeah, it's almost
it's
like
like
coming from
impossible
where
to
I'm.
pick a favorite.
Yeah, yeah, I've kind of put you on the spot there for
Yeah.
sure. No, I hear you on that because some of the projects that we get to work on, and Brandon and I, since COVID, same as you, have had a lot more opportunities in the outdoor space when it comes to content creation for video and for photos and things like that. So I can totally relate to those more intimate settings where you get to share your story. They can tell you a little bit more their history and their passions, and like you said, the hunting stories and how that incorporates into your work, to where it almost feels like you're not working. It almost feels like you're just there with
Yeah.
friends at a
And
certain
that's
point.
always my goal is for it to be like comfortable and fun and, educational and as hands-on or hands-off. I mean, I have some clients that, they just want me to cook the food, come out and talk about it. And then I have some clients they want to be in the kitchen with me, learning. And so each experience is different. But I feel like it's more so like the opportunities to connect with people and having gone through COVID, it's I value that so much more now and having the ability
Mhm.
to build those deeper, connections and friendships and whatnot through my work. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you
Yeah,
said it almost
absolutely.
doesn't feel like work. It is one of those things that, like of course there's times when it's definitely difficult, but I don't think I don't think I'd want to be doing anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a little bit of a confidence curve,
Oh my
right?
God.
So when you feel like you have your shit together versus when you don't. So like it definitely feels like work when you don't feel like you
Oh
have your shit
yeah.
together. But when you have the confidence of I know what I'm doing and I have all of my, you know, for you it's totally different than me, but you have your equipment and you have everything that you feel like my job is being done, then it starts to, be more fun at that point. You can relax a little
Well,
bit
and
and
then
lean
the other
into
thing
it.
was I didn't even know if this was gonna work. Like we were talking, I was having a conversation with
Hmm.
Captain Robert the other day, and we were talking about he was coming into Port O'Connor for the Lone Star Shootout on a 72-foot Viking, and he was like 16-year-old Robert would be so stoked if he like knew what was happening. I was like 16-year-old Holly would be so confused if I told her that this is what I was doing with my life. You know what I mean? Because I really had
Yeah.
no idea
Yeah.
if this was going to work. I had no, like, it's not that I had no plan. I had plans because I'm an engineer. I don't function without plans, plans and processes and all the things. But man, like year 1 and 2, you also hit the nail on the head, like, were hard because I knew how to cook. That's what I knew how to do. And I knew what good service looked like. But I didn't know
Right.
necessarily how this was going to fit in the outdoor hunting and fishing space because one, it's such a tight knit community, and two, there's not really ever been. I mean, I'm not going to say like it's not uncommon for somebody to hire a private chef to come out to your ranch and cook for you and your friends. Like that's not an
Mhm.
uncommon thing. But to have somebody come out and like work with the wild game and teach you about and like on a deeper level, I really didn't know if people were going to bite at that. You know what I mean? Because I think that
Yeah.
there's been a giant shift in the last 4 or 5 years in terms of the culture of the outdoor industry. It's definitely like has a long way to go, but before that it was very much a good old boy, like, you know, let's eat cold ham
Yep.
sandwiches or whatever.
Yep.
And like, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there are definitely times when I'm still like slumming it at deer camp. But so for me, it was like pretty scary those first couple years, like just trying to convince people that it was worth it and like to take a chance to let me do it and like let me give your people this experience, because I always tell people like, yes, the food is like part of it,
Mhm.
but I'm in the business of offering experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that for sure. It kind of makes me think you also offer menu consultation. Is that correct?
Yes. So what that kind of looks like.
So in the instance where, I have a little bit of, skill around the kitchen, I can call you and say, hey, I'm having, this game meat is available to me, or we're hunting this. Is that something I haven't talked to you about this before, so I'm curious.
I think that falls more under like educational type experience, like a live cooking demo. But so like when I say menu consultation, that can mean that if you are at a lodge, and it might not necessarily be cost effective to hire me to come and cook every weekend, or you're not operating on a super super high end scale, I can come in and create a menu for you and train your current chef or whatnot, and just if people were looking to liven up their current like food rotation at their, whatever program they have on. But in terms,
Oh, that's
yeah,
so neat.
so it is pretty cool, because I think, like I said, there's been like a huge market shift where people are more interested in eating the wild game in, different ways, right? There's like so much more interest in it now,
Absolutely.
than there was 4 years ago. So I think there's definitely like a good market. Um, but yeah, so that's more of what like,
And then I know that from my perspective, like you said, kind of diversifying that as far as different
mhm.
ways, right? So when I grew up, one of the first things I did was dove hunt with Brandon in my 20s. I say when I grew up fishing. But my very first time, like out in the field with friends, preparing food was on a dove hunt and bacon wrapped cream cheese jalapeno. That was like the only way we were making this, which
Yeah,
is
I'm
fine.
not gonna
It's good.
hate on
It's
the
just what you
popper.
typically see for dove.
I'm not gonna hate on the popper, but damn,
Yeah,
sometimes I really want to. Yeah,
I know.
dove.
It kills me when I hear somebody just say, we're gonna wrap it in bacon, or we're gonna fry it. It's like, that's all fine and well, but there are other ways that we can
Or
make this a
also
little
like you have
tastier.
molten cheese coming out and overcooked wild game, or your bacon's too chewy, or
Yes,
insert whichever variable that makes that not a super practical way to prepare wild game. But it is convenient in the field, so I do understand that, like that portion. Um,
right. When you don't have a full kitchen, all you have is the barbecue pit
For
on
sure.
the
And
hitch
you
of the
know what
truck,
is
right?
so, like, I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because that is a completely different cooking style. And when I'm writing, like, it depends on which publication I'm currently contributing to, but I always try to like, I have to take myself out of my, like, sometimes chefs, engineers, people that do things at a very technical level tend to get so in depth that we forget that not every human wants to do this level of work to
Hmm.
eat dinner or insert whatever process you want to put there. So I definitely like really try to keep it in mind, like what the goal of it is. Like when I'm doing cooking demos, especially, I try to stick to things that I would make like on a weeknight, or when I'm writing for like Texas Dove Hunters, if I'm talking about a field to table article, it's going to be a preparation that involves like maybe 3 ingredients or less. Something that you could like barbecue or grill like right there on the tailgate. So there's so many like there's a distinction in like styles for like within, which is, I've learned with, because when I first started, I was very much like, I'm never making a popper. I'm never doing this. I'm never doing that. I'm never, never writing this kind of recipes. And like now, as I've like kind of grown, I'm like, no, I want the people that aren't butchering their own deer to also be able to prepare deer as, or whitetail, whatever, as good, you know, as someone who has, you know, is watching all of the butchering videos and is doing it that way. Like there should be, there's space for both. You know, there's recipes for both.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's also kind of,
Have you ever considered doing?
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think we have a little bit of a delay, but it's totally fine. Have you ever considered doing, and you may have already done this, a like butchering 101 for like the whitetail that we have here in Texas? Or I know we did a quail demo here at this place last weekend, but you may have, like I said, you may have already done this, but I didn't know if it's something you've
Definitely
ever considered.
looking to do a ladies like field to table like camp in the future. This is like very much in the like planning process. So
Sign
I
me up.
really would love to do a field to table where we, you know, break down an animal and we package it and we learn how to do all these things, make a couple of dishes and whatnot. Would be great. I'm looking for the right partner, the right ranch outfit to do this with, of course, because again, for me, it is part like it's as much about the experience, the entire experience, as it is just the hunt. So yes, it's definitely been
I mean,
on
and
my
that's
like
something that as hunters, we've had to work on the
sure.
storytelling side of things. And that comes from the hunting side of things when we come and we film and we photograph your hunts, but then also from the cooking side, it's full circle. It's hard for us to combat any kind of misconceptions about the industry or about hunting in general when there's not enough information out there and not told well, and in a way where it's palatable or it's, you know, there is emotion in this. There is a lot of people who have, you know, certain feelings about when they kill. Like for me, and I've cried almost every time that
Mm-hmm.
I've killed a large animal specifically, because for me, this is such a, like I said, full circle experience and a story that can be shared. And it's not just about the adrenaline that you get when you kill this animal. It is
Yeah,
very much so taking a life, right? But whenever you have this idea of somebody who is just a killer and doesn't care about where the meat goes or what happens to the animal or how it's treated or anything like that, then that's totally separate from the story that I'm trying to tell people. So
absolutely.
I know
And you
you
know,
can
I
relate to
do,
that
like I
too.
said, the narrative has shifted so much in the last few years where people like there are so many stories like to be told, so many behind the scenes moments. Like there's like hunting is like a movie in a way. Like there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's heartbreak and there's excitement and there's joy and there's pain. And it's like I feel like all all of those things like are now like now we're working in a way to show the world like what that means, you know, what it means to be a hunter, what it means to be an outdoorsman, what it means to be a champion of conservation, what it means to, you know, like hold on to our heritage. Like I talked about this on a podcast before where I'm like very against the notion that we smile in hunting, because we can't be too happy that something's died. But I'm, you know, I feel like you should be proud and take joy and enjoy those moments and like, but it's the communication that happens after that really like gives that smiling photo context, you know, where it's like it's all about context. I feel like, you know, as telling the story, you know, goes, it's the context of why you're smiling. I mean, for me, I'm
Yeah.
one usually so grateful after um any catch, harvest, whatever word you want to use. I'm so grateful and overjoyed and like overwhelmed with emotion, you know, that it's like I don't always know how to like it just comes out however it comes out. Um and then
Yeah, and I mean, I'm one of those people that as I've, for lack of a better term, advanced in my hunter's lifestyle. I am one of those people who smiles in my photos, but I'm also the person who posts a series of me literally like grooming this animal, as even with turkeys, like just appreciating the colors and the, they're just insanely beautiful. All of them have their own way of showing like how unique they are, the area that they were brought up in, and the smile itself. There's, like you said, there's a story behind that. It's
Yeah.
not just like a grip and grin and that's it. There's, like you said, the context really, really matters. And when I talk about, this turkey we're going to have, I take pictures of us, cleaning the turkey, breasting it out. This is just an example, but I tell that side of the story, even though sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
it's not as popular.
It does matter.
That matters. When I'm also posting grip and grin style, I feel like there's a little bit of a responsibility to tell that entire story and make sure that people understand why I have that certain feeling
and when
of
you're
happiness.
not, though, you're really doing hunters, non-hunters, everyone a disservice, because it's just like when you only see the highlight reel of someone's life on social media. There's so much joy and pain behind everything. Right. It's never as cut and dry as a cleanly curated social media page. It's never that, easy. So I really think when you tell the whole story, start to finish, all, like, maybe not all the gruesome, gory shots, but, I think
not
that if you don't
yeah.
share those moments and those things, you are doing a disservice to people. And I'm not one of those people that feels like I need to overly justify like my love of hunting or my love of fishing or my love of outdoors. I don't like, as I've gotten older, I have like definitely not felt the need to make people understand why I feel how I feel, but maybe show them like, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. So we're talking about telling stories and the depth of things. And so for me, it's cool because I teeter between a couple different worlds. I'm fishing, hunting, but also like the culinary world. So because I spend a lot of time with a lot of chefs, and that's part of my like personal development, but I've had the opportunity to bring people into the outdoors that might not necessarily like would have ever wanted to or thought about doing it, because through food and through the connection, because like the world has changed. We care why now because of like social media has a lot of downsides, but it has a lot of great things too. It's made people curious about so many more topics and so much more like it's just made people so curious and aware. You know what I mean? I think it's really like raised awareness about like the conditions for where some of our like
commercial
for sure. I was trying to, I didn't know how comfortable we weren't talking about it. So
no. I mean, we could go off. We could do a whole other episode on that. I actually have a degree in agricultural communications and journalism, so a lot of my passion has to do with has to do with bridging the gap and telling those stories too, right? Because feeding this many people takes, like I said, we could do a whole other
so that's
podcast
like
episode on
what's
this,
kind of cool for me is I feel like sometimes like though things have gotten better and we've become like, I feel like as a whole outdoors become like less I'm just gonna do it because I should have the right to do it, and more like here's why I do it, and I want to show I want you to see the beauty that I see, and it's less about these are my rights and like you know what I'm saying. So it's cool to be kind of like in both worlds, to see the way that food connects people to the outdoors and how it has had the ability to bring people into the outdoors that never would have been there in the first place or never thought about it. Because I mean, my favorite thing is like, I just don't think that hunting is, my favorite statement is I don't think hunting is ethical, but you're eating a steak. I'm like, okay, well, do you know how that animal was treated in life and death? And I'm not like, I'm right. And I'm like, so I always bring that up because, and then, what's so funny is this is like, I have a lot in common with vegetarians and people, like a lot of people I know that do not eat meat. It's because they can't guarantee that it's, humanely raised, harvested, respected. They're like, I will eat. And I actually have friends that they're like, I'm a vegetarian, but I will eat any of the meat that like you bring me, or I know for a fact because it's they're of the opinion, like,
Yeah. And that goes back to what you were saying about social media, is that there's so much more curiosity. They're starting to care what's on the back of a label, right? So if they're caring about at that level, of course they're going to care about where their meat is coming from, or if it has antibiotics. And that's, like I said, let's just go ahead and book this next podcast so we can get into all this. But antibiotics versus organic versus grass-fed versus, there's all kinds of arguments to be made about what preferences you have, right? And that's kind of how I like to look at it, is this is a preference. I'm not going to force my preferences on you. This is literally a preference. There's a market for just about everything these days. But it's, like you said, there's a lot of cons of social media, but the pros,
yes,
the
absolutely,
conversations are being had, right? And so that's part of the mission, is to just have the conversation and be open to
for
having
sure.
those
And I definitely think that I love the curiosity, and I love, like, at our event on Friday, it was so overwhelming to me that there was all these women that, like, had never hunted or shot come and learned how to hunt and shoot, or learned how to shoot, and hung around for the cooking demo. That was just, like, tickled me to death that there was people that they came to this event to learn how to do it, and that was pretty cool to be a part of that. And I definitely, like, really, I'm looking forward to hosting more events that are open to the public, because I, like, for, like we were talking about, I've operated mainly in, like, the private space in the last couple years, and as my business has, like, shifted and changed, there's definitely become more of a need for things like for educational opportunities for people in the outdoors.
Yeah. Well, and on that subject, so I don't know if you know this, but Brandon and I are part of the Ranching and Wildlife Committee on the Rodeo Houston event. And every year we have a 3-day or 4-day, maybe I'm saying this wrong. The first week of rodeo, we have an expo and seminar schedule. And part of those, it has been some cooking demonstrations and some educational opportunities for the public to come up, and it's all free. So if you're interested, I'd love to kind of pitch you as one of our potential chefs, or, for lack of a better term, cooking demo type things, especially because you specialize in wild game. I know this year we had I want to say it was a processor, but I'll have to look into that. One of the other captains is in charge of all of that. So I think that's so awesome, though, that you specifically want, to provide these opportunities for the public. That's huge. And it really is
for sure
how much you care.
One of my main goals and missions, I'm like bringing people in, like, to the outdoors, is that I want people to be comfortable using the meat that they have in their freezer. And I feel like we've all been guilty of, letting some of it waste, but I think there's a disconnect. People get a little bit intimidated, a little bit nervous to try new things. Like, they might not like it, or they might think that it's too hard, or insert whatever excuse we have for not doing. But that's ultimately what my goal is with the cooking demonstrations. And hopefully I'll put out a book this year. But yes, hopefully.
Oh,
I'm looking for a publisher right now. But I want people to be comfortable in the outdoor space, in the kitchen, and the way that all of those things connect. And I think, when I write recipes, like, writing recipes that are easy and able, like, weeknight recipes, like venison lettuce wraps is probably one of my, like, go-to weeknight meals, because I usually have a pound of ground venison and at least some soy sauce and stuff to make it awesome. And lettuce, we always have an excess of lettuce. But like, things like that, I feel like are important. I really just want people to be comfortable, like, using the wild game that they have in their freezer, right? And, like, have recipes that are not overly complicated, because from a lot of the things that I've seen in the cookbooks that already exist, is they require a lot of fancy ingredients, or they require a lot of steps and processes, or you have to go through a whole section of butchering and do it this particular way, which I'm sure I will put a book out like that at some point. But you have to do it this particular way to the part of the cooking season, right? Like to get to the part where we cook, we have to butcher a whole, which of course we do.
Yep. Or you need, an equipment or a meat
For
grinder or
sure.
something
And
else that
so
not
I just
everybody
want to
has.
make,
Right. Yeah.
I just want to put out useful information, useful tools for people that make it more a part of their daily life and integrating that into their, weekly
Yeah.
existence, if you will.
Yeah. And what's even nicer is that, like, I know in my instance, sometimes before we were hunting, it would be, a relative or a friend saying, hey, I have some extra ground venison, or hey, I have, a hog shoulder, or I have these pieces that I'm trying to clean out my freezer for the hunting season. And if you have people who are just like, I have no idea what to do with this, right? So it could help them as well to be encouraged to say, oh, yes, please, I've had a recipe I want to try. Or I think the book is going to be fantastic. I think you have, and from my perspective, I think you have a demand for that. I think you have more and more people, as you said, with the outdoor industry being turned a little bit more inside out, that are curious about hunting and wild game specifically. And this may be just because I'm in Texas. I don't know. This may not be all over the world. But as far as I know, from people I've talked to that have never even, like I said, picked up a gun or been out in the wild or aren't comfortable, right?
Yeah,
That can be an
it is.
introduction through
That's
food.
kind of, I always like to think of it like as if I wasn't raised how I was raised, or if I wasn't, how am I going to have the conversation? How am I going to, like, everybody connects over food. It's biblical. I mean, it goes back, to to our first existence. Like, people hunted and shared meals. Like, so there's something very like primal, I think, about sharing food with someone, and about like sharing. So you want to talk about like the ultimate connector really is breaking bread, sharing a meal. And that's like kind of, I feel like, what makes it so, what's the word? So easily, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It makes it so, like, it's like
Like
very congruent.
palatable.
Like, like hunting and
Ironic.
cooking and
Mm-hmm.
fishing, like all the things, like there are things that connect us, and like food connects us on such a deep level. I feel like it's, people don't actually realize how deeply connected we are by food. Most of our social interaction throughout history happens, like, how many people go on, like, what is the average first date? It's a dinner or a lunch, right? Like, people seek connection over food. So I think that it's because of that, that food is such a great connector. It's an incredible place to connect the hunting portion and the outdoor portion, because it's so ingrained in us as people.
Yeah. Yeah, completely agree. And it's almost ironic how once you are comfortable with having the conversation, you start to realize how much hunting in the
Yeah,
outdoors is ingrained in humans. And so that's fantastic. I envy your mission. I think we have a lot of alignment. I really enjoyed your time today. I think we hit it out of the park when it comes to covering a lot of different
for
things, and I think we
sure.
have a ton of topics to talk about in the future. Where can people find you? I know we've
Oh,
mentioned
you should
Hotshot
definitely
Holly on
find me on
Instagram,
Game
but
Girl
where else can they
Gourmet.
find you?
Hotshot Holly is more of my personal shenanigans. But find me on Game Girl Gourmet on Instagram and at www.gamegirlgourmet.com. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. So there you go.
Yep, and she shares recipes pretty frequently, y'all, that are stellar. This last one was the quail, the Parmesan risotto quail that we had at this event last week
Oh,
was
that was so fun. I loved making
A1.
that dish for you. I joke
A1.
that it's
So good.
almost famous because it's been published so many times, but it really is like, that is one tried and true recipe. Oh, also, I test my recipes 3 times before I publish them. So if you eat one of my wild game recipes, please know that it's been tested, like, so you don't have to worry about if it's gonna be like wrong. It's not, I promise. And if you don't like it, then that's a personal preference thing. I can't fix that. Yeah, it sounds like a personal problem.
That's your sounds like a personal problem
But
then.
Yes, it
Well,
was so
thank you
great
so
to
much,
chat with
Holly. We really
you.
appreciate you.
Yes, I'm excited.
Looking
I get
forward
to
to
cook for
seeing you later
you
this week.
twice in a week. What
So hopefully we
even?
can, yes, I know. I know. Well, thanks so much, and
Bye.
we'll see you on the next one.